This is a 64 AC30 that I last had in 2012, and it has come back. It has got some intermittent issues. There's a hum, which is higher than it should be. It's got 4 old mullered EL84s. They may not be perfectly matched, or I may need to experiment with the order of those old EL84s to get the right combination, so each side, the push side and the pull side, are all drawing the same amount of current, so that hum goes away. But if I move the chassis, it gets much worse, and there's that staticky sound. And let me power it off, let those tubes cool off. I might have to pull the tubes in just a minute. And the reason that can happen with these old AC30s is because there's a steel chassis here that forms this kind of U shape, and there's this aluminum chassis here, and they're bolted together. And sometimes the hardware gets loose, and a lot of times over the decades, just corrosion builds up between the steel and the aluminum, and you don't get good grounds, or intermittent grounds, and that's what you just heard. I went quickly through the amp before I started recording, so I can also tell you that these 100 ohm half-watt screen grid resistors that I installed in 2012, and that is, you can see one tuck back here, these half-watt 100 ohms, that's what JMI used. That's what it was in the amp originally. The ones that were in the amp originally were pretty crisp. These have drifted, so they're no longer 100 ohms. They're between 120 and 170 ohms. That could be adding to the issue. So I'm going to replace all those with at least 1 watts, and probably going to go to 270 or 470 ohms. In a reissue, I'll go to 1K, make EL84s last longer. And in old JMI, I'll try to observe the original spec as much as possible, but certainly these half-watt carbon comps aren't going to make it. They've made it 11 years, but it's time for them to be replaced. I'm going to replace them with something that should not need to be replaced again in just a decade. The rest of the amp is as I left it. It's got F&Ts, had a whole bunch of bad pots. I changed those out, so that's the bass, that's the cut, and the volumes for brilliant, normal, and vibrato channels. There's no getting around that. The old treble pot was still good, so it's there. You can see I've changed out this mix resistor and this mix resistor, and by and large, all the other things in the amp are original to the amp, aside from a couple cathode bypass caps. But it has all the old WEMA gold foils, an awful lot of original resistors. I'll be verifying to make sure none of those have drifted. And it has a silver mica 470 picofarad or 500 picofarad there in the top boost circuit. Let me check, see what I used 12 years ago. All right, it just says SM, so I'll be changing that out for a ceramic. Even if this one is not problematic at the moment, I have learned that the ones that just say SM are problematic or often become problematic. So it's a no-brainer to change that out while the amp is on the bench. Everything else looks pretty good. It's not the cleanest example, but I expect that once I get all those grounds corrected and get the screens balanced, we'll be in a much better starting place. And maybe I can find the right combination of the 4 EL84s, the 4 mullards, to make this amp sound as it ought. Here is one of the 3 places where the chassis are held together, so I'll be removing that screw and the bolt on the other side and cleaning the metal. And once I get this separated from the other chassis, I'll get in there and clean the surfaces between the two. Here is where the AC safety ground is made to the chassis, and that bolt is held on by the transformer mounting hardware. And as the chassis flexes, that can get loose. So this will be taken apart and cleaned and retightened as well, because it's very common for, as this aluminum flexes, for that to come loose. Here is the middle point where the chassis should be held together, and that bolt is missing entirely, so it'll get some new hardware clamping the chassis together here. The third bit of hardware clamping the chassis together is right here, and again there's a ground here being made to the transformer mounting hardware. That ground is now suspect and will be redone. And all the transformer hardware here will be retightened. You can see that these flanges on the back of the power and output transformer help support this aluminum part of the panel. And over time, the aluminum deforms, so these connections get loose. It's a shame, but it's all I can do. If I could snap my fingers and take everything apart and take this to a machine shop and have them clamp this all nice and square and plumb again, I would, but that would be a hideous expense that would give no real benefit beyond the cosmetics. So I don't think that's going to be in the cards for this, but we will get it so electronically everything is good and mechanically everything is solid, even if it's no longer exactly square. All right, I've got everything taken apart and all the grommets pulled out of place because they were also holding the chassis together. I'll go in there and clean off these grommets because they are filthy, filthy, filthy. All the screws and nuts and stuff went through about 4 rounds in my ultrasonic cleaner, and they're currently sitting in an isopropyl bath so they don't rust. And once I was able to separate the two parts of the chassis, you can see all this gunk that has accumulated down there over the years. Fuzz and dirt and bits of wood and who knows what, and just corrosion and yuck. I mean, that's a pretty massive stash of shit. So I'm going to get in here. I can't do it on camera because, I've got to really maneuver things around without dropping anything, and they're tenuous connections between the chassis right now, the two halves of the chassis. But once I get all that out and get all that dirt out so we have good clean metal-to-metal contact, I can make some good progress. Now right in here, I'm not sure if you're going to see it on the camera, there's a big curve in the chassis where it's pulled into an arc. And it's kind of convex right here from this perspective. It's concave from the other side. I'm going to not finish this part today because I want to go to the hardware store in town tomorrow that has some really big fender washers. And I'm going to get maybe 4 to 6 on each one of these spots and tighten them with a screw so that there's a big thickness of steel on the other side and on this side in like a 2 to 3 inch diameter area as large as I can fit. And then when I tighten all those together, it will force at least these areas to be flush again down at the other end as well. And I'll be able to get in here. Once this stuff is made square again, I'll be able to bend these flanges back to a straighter angle. I can't do it on camera here, but you can see how far that has moved. It's really deformed, and I can move this without stressing the metal and breaking it and get it really reinforced. When I put it back together, I'm not sure if I'm going to use all of the original hardware. In places like this, I'm going to want to add some more fairly thick washers to reinforce this on both sides, here and on the other side of the aluminum chassis, so that there's more support at those areas. This thing will be much more rock solid. It was a good design, but aluminum is inherently a bendable thing. It's malleable. And to keep this thing going, we're going to need to augment JMI's original intent. I've got a lot of cleaning to do right now. Tomorrow morning I'll go and get those big thick fender washers and start to reinforce and repair this thing, and all those ugly noises will be a thing of the past. Thanks for watching.